So hello everyone, I'm Laurie Sigfridson. I am the current president of PHE Canada, and I'm really thrilled to have you all join us today for, I think it's our 9th cross-country check-in. And so we started these check-ins because we felt that now more than ever before, we needed to connect as a community of practice. And we really wanted to make sure that we were supporting each other in a meaningful way, and because none of us have ever experienced anything quite like this before, or I'm assuming none of us have, and so being able to come together and share ideas and best practices on how we're able to support each other and support learning continuity for our students, I think has been really beneficial. And I think that is highlighted by the number of individuals that have colleagues, friends from across the country that have connected in on these calls. And so this being our 9th call, I think we're up to just about 2,000 people joining us. And so we're thrilled that we're able to do this, that we have a platform that we can connect. And so welcome to today's check-in. Today we are going to have a conversation around comprehensive school health and health education, and what does a healthy school look like going forward. And with us today, we have some special guests. My co-host today is Dr. Anthony Card. Dr. Card is the Dean of Education at Mount St. Vincent University here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and thrilled to have him join us today. He's also one of our PHE Canada board members and has been a part of the PHE family for many years, and is a great advocate, supporter, and educator within our field. And with him today, he has 2 colleagues as well that's going to help share in this discussion. We are going to try to monitor the chat room as best we can. We can use the under the participants list down at the bottom. There is a place where you can raise your hand if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you want to share. This conversation really is all about you, our members, and so sharing what our collective knowledge is. And so we've come up with a couple of guiding questions to start the conversation, but really this is an opportunity for you to share, connect, ask, and so we will have some time together over the next hour and a half to do that. And so welcome everyone, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Card, and we'll get the conversation started.
Great, thanks very much, Laurie. Thanks for that kind introduction. Really excited to be here for this conversation this afternoon. We are, in terms of the people that are registered, we're reaching every province and territory in the country, and that's really exciting. And the main organisations around health promoting schools, comprehensive school health, are here today. So exciting, really looking forward to doing this. I framed the conversation around the comprehensive school health approach and the 4 pillars, and I'm going to talk about that and frame the discussion. But before I do that, I want to introduce my colleagues who I have the pleasure of working with every day, and ask them just to introduce themselves. Dr. Sarah King.
Hi, I'm Sarah King. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work with Anthony at the Mount in Halifax as a co-coordinator of the school psychology program that we offer, our graduate program. So yes, I'm here to weigh in on any psychology related questions or information that people need or want. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sarah. Melissa?
I'd like to thank Sarah for going first, because everything that she said also applies to me except for my name. So thanks for having us.
Oh, that's super. So I think this just every biannually we have a school health forum. We've had 3 of them so far in Ottawa, and of course we'll look forward to doing another one whenever PHE Canada is able to do that. And I think at that event, and when I've been to other conferences in provinces such as the Ontario Healthy Schools Coalition, much of that discussion turns to mental health. And I'm sensing that people have real concerns, and we know that students are going to be have some anxiety coming to school, anxiety about the washroom, having lunch, about having to distance or not, things that they may not feel comfortable with. So I thought, let's get some real expertise here around psychology and child psychology. So as you have questions, we'll defer them to Melissa and Sarah on those particular aspects. Okay, so let's frame the rest of the discussion. So this is based on the comprehensive school health model, the 4 pillars. This is provided by the Joint Consortium for School Health. I've chosen this one because it's the most widely adopted and used in Canada. And the 4 pillars, as I'm sure you are aware, are the social and physical environment, teaching and learning, healthy school policy, partnerships and services. And I tend to divide the time into each of those areas. So let's put some questions out there, and I'm going to identify some people that are on the call that I think would absolutely have some wisdom to share with us. So I may name you or name your organization. So in terms of the social and physical environment, we know that schools are thinking about how they divide up spaces, how lines will be put in gym spaces, restricted numbers going into the gym. Teachers have talked about the use of outdoor spaces and how we can take advantage of that. Things such as orienteering may be a good option, and how in our classes it might be dance, yoga, fitness, lots of creative activities. But what do these modified spaces look like? So if you're working with a school board, school district, I'm particularly interested to hear from Quebec. We had a couple of conversations in French. And obviously they're confronted with that right now. Others are further in the spectrum, but these are issues that I think are confronting all of us. So we'd certainly like to hear from you on that. In terms of teaching and learning, our cross-country check-ins so far have they started off by talking about social media. Teachers forced to do things from home, and so which platforms were they using, how are they using them, and the advantages and disadvantages of those. Many teachers were able to mail out resources to students at home. Other school boards specifically precluded that from happening. So some variety there. But a lot of teachers were able to provide fitness challenges. They were able to do things like Northern Games. And some moved on so that activities were physical activities, but also cognitive, emotive, affective, based on move, think, feel, act. And so on, paying a lot more attention to that. But much of the discussion we've had has been around physical education rather than health education. And in health education, as we know in schools, that's very broad. I mean, we talk in primary kindergarten about the importance of wearing a bicycle helmet. We talk about bullying, addictions, nutrition, mental health, hygiene, but not really pandemic planning. I can't think of a provincial curriculum that has pandemic planning in it. So this is something we're going to need to talk to all children about, at all ages, and all stages in this. So how do we do that? And how do we prepare to do that? And what's the messaging and so on? We have some wonderful people on the call. We have representatives from TAPE, SPEAR, Dr. here from University of Saskatchewan. Love to hear your thoughts on the health education curriculum and some things we can do there. I notice we have a large number from Newfoundland and Labrador. I think it's a conspiracy. You're either trying to get me back or make sure I don't go back. I'm hoping it's the former. But I'd love to hear from PSAC and the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Education Council. I think you'd have a lot to share with us here. In terms of school policy, what policies are you busy adopting, making? We know that policy happens at different levels. It happens at the provincial level, it happens at the school board level, it happens at the district level, and at the school level as well. So what policies are you thinking about, have created, about to create, are you negotiating? I see we've got the New Brunswick Teachers Association here. Love to hear your thoughts. You haven't had many pandemic cases, COVID-19 cases recently. Perhaps you're further along in some of that thinking. And close to that, we have PEI, and I saw Sterling on the call. Maribeth's here. What are you thinking in your government context? Also, we have a number of large school boards and school districts. Halifax Regional's here, Toronto District School Board. What policies are you making in some of the larger boards as well as some of the smaller boards as well? We have a number of organisations on the call that provide services to schools, and under the partnerships and services pillar, I think it would be great if we could hear from groups such as Sport for Life, in BC, Pacific Institute for Sports Excellence. We have Box Kids here. Love to hear what you're thinking about in terms of how you're approaching schools and the work that you do and how you've had to change your work. Play Northwest Territories. You've been putting out some amazing things. Can curling was the latest one. Taking a tin can, rolling it down your hallway, sweeping with the broom into a target. Lots of fun activities you've got at home. But I think perhaps things that are going on with the Aboriginal Sports Circle as well, and that will be in other jurisdictions as well. And then all of these pillars are supposed to happen in an integrated way, an integrated approach. So I think there's an opportunity here to hear from some of the larger organizations in school health. So Everactive, if Brian, Chris is here, I'd love to hear from you. Ophir, perhaps, or of BC. Any of you folks, we would love to hear your thoughts. So let's start by thinking perhaps about the environment, the social and physical environment. This will be the topic of the next cross-country check-in next week. So I don't want to spend all the time on this, but I think we do need to reflect on a few pieces here. So if you'd like to raise a question or have some comment to offer, please put your hand up now. Use the raise hand check there, and we'd be happy to go to you.
So I'm just reading the comment, and so there was someone, so Jen Walsh, Woody? No, Jen Walsh from Woody Point, sorry. So I think she's one of your Newfoundland and Labrador teachers, Anthony, in the comment section, just saying, yeah, it's a great opportunity for having those alternatives for physical education through yoga, dance, and so that, but the question is, how do we properly engage with kids? And so I think that, you know, how do we still make it meaningful when we have to stay, you know, 6 feet apart from them? And how do we develop those relationships that we know are so key in the learning process? So Jen, did I represent that question right? Or maybe you want to hop on and speak to that a little bit more?
I have a heavily male population in the 7 to 12. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I have heavy population of male athletes, I'm going to say, because they are very athletic. And things like yoga, they'll do it once. Dance, I cannot get them to do whatsoever because they have that, I guess, fear of doing something wrong or looking silly. And even as much as fitness, 7 to 9 boys will not take part. The girls are perfect, but it's very small units. So I'm just wondering how to engage with them and motivate them to do these kinds of things, because they are not motivated to do that. They will do that stuff on their own time, but not where everybody else is. So that's my concern. They're big into like hockey, volleyball, basketball, like anything that there's a competition, there's a winning, there's a losing. So my biggest struggle with coming from here, because we have low population as well, and for us here in Woody Point, it's going to be, how do we motivate the kids to take part in these, I'm going to say low intensity or lower intensity activities. If I can get them outside, I get them outside. I barely use my gym whatsoever because I live in Grossmore National Park. So we take advantage of whatever is here. But the fact of the matter is, if we still have to remain socially distant from each other, group projects, Quincy building in the winters and everything, that's something that's going to be foreign to them in the next few years, because we're not going to be able to get inside of those Quincy's and maintain the 6-foot distancing. That makes sense. Like, there's a lot of things that's going through my head, because we do a lot of outdoor activities, but it's mainly like gym activities or outdoor education activities, but it's all group work, and I don't know how to stop them from interacting with each other at a 6-foot distance or a social distancing policy.
I think this is the issue that we're all trying to figure out. You know, and I was listening to Lydell, Reg, I think you're on the call, of the SPEAR conversation, saying how, you know, you have to meet the provincial curriculum as well. You've got to meet the curriculum outcomes. It's got to be a safe activity. And now you've got to think about public health legislation requirements as well. You're going to play with those three things. Yes, sure, in Gross Mourne you have a wonderful background outdoor playground, but I understand the rest of it. Yeah.
I can jump in, Anthony. It's Reg. I put up in the chat too. I know that we're worried about physical education coming back, but in some ways, as a subject area, we have the largest space if we're looking at social distancing and the opportunities to go outside. But I just wrote down that I think it's going to be a holistic approach moving forward, because I'll use language arts as an example. Maybe the best place to teach language arts in the fall when the kids come back is going to be outside. Just like we're thinking outside or larger spaces. I think there's some opportunities for physical education to support the other areas of instruction. And I'm not quite sure what that'll look like, but I'm just trying to think holistically, because ultimately how our students return and what that's going to look like, physical education might be able to lead, and health might be able to lead that. Because if kids aren't healthy, or if we're not healthy, then we're going to struggle at school, right? So that's just another thought that I'd toss out there.
Thanks, Reg. Let's open it up to others. Vicky, I see you're in the chat. Maybe you'd like to share your comments. I presume that's Vicky from Truro, Nova Scotia.
It is. I'm trying new headphones. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, cool. Yeah, I completely agree with Reg when he talks, and we've talked about this, I think, till the cows came home, about integrating physical and health ed into every other subject, and we've always talked about how we're going to do that and how we want to make that work. But I think now more than ever, we're starting to see, I know in Nova Scotia, when we came out with our plan as a province, a lot of people in physical and health ed were a little taken aback because it only really encompassed the 4 core subject areas. I was really quite disappointed, because I think now, especially during this time, worrying about health and health ed should have been at the forefront of that. And I think going back in September, if we get back, or however that might look, I do truly think that physical and health ed need to lead that, and it needs to be at the forefront, because first and foremost, like Reg said, if students aren't healthy, they can't learn. And if they're not ready to learn, if they're not in a good mind frame to learn, then they can't learn those other subject areas. So really integrating, I mean, science is an easy one to integrate outdoor ed with, right? And things like that, getting outside, math, wholeheartedly outdoor ed, completely combine the two, and to really work with other teachers in the building to try to combine their subject areas in the most amount of space in your building possible, I think will be the way to go.
Absolutely. Okay. Who's putting up their hand? Or maybe we'll move on to the next area of discussion. Let's move to talking about teaching and learning, and that particular piece, as I say, will be followed on next week. So thank you for those ideas. So the curriculum. Let's follow on some thoughts around that, and perhaps how do we talk to young people about a pandemic? Maybe I'll put one of my colleagues on the spot to ask that question to start with. Maybe Dr. McGonnell or Dr. King, you'd like to come in on that? How do we talk to children about the pandemic situation?
Well, I think, I mean, I'll just say I don't know because we've never done this before. But I think generally when we're talking to kids about things that are scary or things that tend to get kids and parents worried, I think my approach when talking to kids about things that are worrisome is generally keep the talking to a minimum. Don't over talk and over rationalize, especially with younger kids. They need to know the facts, and they need to know what's important to keep themselves safe. So they need to be told maybe multiple times about physical distancing or how to wash their hands, or the rules that we're going to have to follow if and when we get back to normal. But I think minimizing lots and lots of talk and lots of discussion about it, and giving them the information they need to know is important, but also promoting a sense of safety and a sense of calm, and letting them know that the adults in the room know what they're doing and are going to be keeping them safe and are telling them the things that they need to know to keep them safe. So really promoting a sense of calm, a sense of community, and knowing that if they have a question, the adults, the teacher or the parent, whoever that adult might be, is there to help them, that they don't have to figure this all out themselves, and just letting them know that there is a plan and somebody has control of it, so that it doesn't seem so big and out of control. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to weigh in on that.
No, I agree absolutely with everything that you said. And I would add that I think that mistake that we sometimes make when we're answering questions that children have is that we answer them as though we're talking to adults. And it's really important to stick with answering the question that they ask. And then if they have more questions, knowing that they will come back to you and ask more questions, but to not go beyond to try and fill in all the things that you could possibly say to them about the whole situation, because that can take forever. And it can feel overwhelming. Well, it's overwhelming for lots of adults, so it can certainly be overwhelming for kids. So, developmentally appropriate and tell them what they want to know.
I see lots of people taking notes as you were talking. Thank you. Really great sound advice there. Let's switch across the country. You're hearing a lot from Nova Scotia at the moment. Let's go to BC. Lisa Manzini, would you mind coming in with explaining what's happening in BC to us? Okay, maybe we're not connecting with Lisa. Is someone else from BC would like to chime in for us?
Okay, I'm here.
Oh, thanks.
So what's been happening the last several weeks, we've had tier 1 students in schools, and each area kind of is in control of how they're going to manage their tier 1 students. So that would be healthcare worker students and hospital employees, etc., back at school. So last Friday we had an announcement that schools will be back June 1st. And starting on the 28th, tier 1, 2, and 3 students will be back in their home schools. So I wrote that on Monday, I'll be in charge of 10 children. One of our concerns out here, though, is that our language has now been changed within our health policy, our education policy, and our WorkSafe, that the term physical distancing is no longer applying in a school setting. So that means no more 2 meters. It will apply adult to adult, but not student, teacher, teacher. And the new term is called, I wrote it down, limited physical contact. So that's got some people quite worried now about the limited physical contact, because we don't need to maintain the 3 meters or the 2 meter distance. And also I'm on the health and safety team. So, just questions about bathroom usage. What will equipment usage look like? Like when I go in, I'm going back into school today to number off my equipment, and a student will be assigned a number next week, and that will be their phys ed equipment. And I have a lot of skipping ropes, so I'm doing skipping routines until the end of June, and a lot of outside time. And for the person who was talking about the boys, you can make you can make huge competitions with skipping. So I was thinking of the skipping. So that's what's going on out here. Yeah. So on June 1st, the K to 5 students will be in school 50% of the time. Each district's in charge of organizing how they'd like to do it. So my district, for instance, Monday, Thursdays, Tuesday, Fridays will be students' days. Wednesday will be an online learning day. And for the high school students or grades 6 to 12, that will be 20% of the time. So 1 day a week. So we don't actually have a picture of what 1 day a week will look like in a high school setting yet. That's what's going on out in BC right now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I've heard much discussion around focusing individual activities that don't require equipment. So I think that that's really helpful to hear the idea of numbering equipment and trying to manage equipment in a different way, because one of the concerns that's been raised is that physical education is not physical activity. We shouldn't be just reduced to that. It is a lot more than that. And so being able to offer a more fuller curriculum, I think, is a great way forward. I don't want to keep putting people on the spot. I'm going to put one more person on the spot, but I don't want to keep doing that. If you please use the hand thing, put your hand up on the thing here. We'd be happy to share the questions and so on, or raise your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure we find someone to answer those. Let's go across the country to Kelly Baker. Kelly, I put you on the spot here to St. John's, Newfoundland. How's the Newfoundland Labrador Health Education Teachers Council dealing with this?
Thanks very much, Anthony. Yes, we do miss you. The positives here, I guess, are that with our Newfoundland Labrador English School Board, we have Learning at Home, it's called. So it's a page for learning at home. And the very first thing on that page is well-being. And underneath the well-being is student voice, student well-being, caregiver well-being, and guidance services. So it's a family approach as well as students. There's also sources and resources there for families. And that's the very first thing. After that comes the math, the English language arts, and then after that comes the passion for learning. So we were pretty pleased from a health perspective, not necessarily health education per se, but from a health perspective, that well-being was front and center in our province, especially given all of the talk around social emotional learning being the plate that we have to have before we can put learning onto that and build learning onto that. So that's huge right now in Newfoundland Labrador, is the social emotional learning being at the base, and that has to be attended to first before we can expect real meaningful deep learning. So it was good to see that it wasn't only talk, and that there was an actual real concerted effort toward that. But with respect to health education, I guess, and how it's being delivered, I have I'm not sure that it's being actually delivered that much, or the uptake isn't necessarily that high. Google Meet is the platform that has been recommended for us to use with our students. So K to 6, again, it seems like a lot of teachers, for a variety of reasons we all know and we're all very familiar with, are focusing more on the English language arts and the math and the things like that, with not much time really devoted with their students towards health education. You know, some mindfulness things and some well-being things, and some, trying to check in with our students and make sure they're okay, and things like that for sure. But health education proper, maybe not so much. And with 7 to 12, I mean, it's a subject area that's taught by a separate teacher. So I think the teachers are providing that. Whether the uptake is there is another thing altogether. For instance, my daughter is continuing to take the Healthy Living course with her high school. Sometimes she is the only person in that chat, which for me is okay because I go to it too, and I do the yoga or the whatever with her when I can, and it's also my best friend offering the course. So for us, it works out okay. But so there's not necessarily the uptake there, even when teachers are providing health ed. So positives and negatives, because it's all challenging in new times. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Kelly. An observation that came out of the SPEAR discussion, and Jennifer and others are on the call here, was that one of the best predictors of lifelong physical activity, of taking that up as a habit, is exercising as a family, is going out and doing activities together. And I think the observations were, we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more children playing with the family in the yard, or going for a walk together or something like that. And so I think what you're talking about there is building on that, and that social emotional connection early, as a positive from this. So, okay, let's, okay, would someone like to put up their hand? Let's go to the next. Still looking for perhaps someone from Ontario. We haven't heard much from Ontario. Okay. If not, I'm going to move the discussion on to talk about policy and school health policy. Mary Beth or Sterling, both with the PEI government, perhaps you'd like to come in and talk about things you're doing from a government policy perspective around comprehensive school health.
Hi, Anthony. Is Mary Beth still on the call?
I am. Go ahead, Sterling. I'll fill in if needed.
Well, there's not a lot to fill in, because like most jurisdictions, where all of us are flying by the seat of our pants with these things, and policies are normally slow to develop, with lots of time for feedback and lots of time for input from various stakeholders, but things are changing very quickly. I think Mary Beth could speak more to, kind of as a curriculum specialist within our government. One thing that I would like to just refer to is connected to the Joint Consortium for School Health. We're in the process of developing our kind of next year 5-year mandate, going through approvals through health ministries and education ministries. And I think in today's call, I really thank Mary Beth for extending the invitation to myself as one of the co-chairs, and Pat Martz from Alberta is on the call as well. I think there's opportunity for these two organizations, PHE Canada and the Joint Consortium, to collaborate on what does this look when we go forward to school return. I know we're often talking post-pandemic, post-COVID, but the reality could be, God forbid, it could be still in the middle of things come the fall, depending on different waves, different cycles. So what we're looking at within the Joint Consortium is exactly what you're talking about today as a group, is how do we support mental well-being? How do we support things like problematic substance abuse? What about the school food environment, which has really been highlighted within most jurisdictions as critically important to families? When we shut down schools and we shut down lunch programs and breakfast programs, there was a huge demand for governments and community organizations alike in trying to support people that all had to go home and were laid off, had no income and no access. So as we plan our work plan, the Joint Consortium, for the next year, very much the focus is how do we support mental health, mental well-being, problematic substance use, and the school food environment, all within that comprehensive school health framework. So we would reach to individuals like yourselves and your organization around that curricular piece. How do we support that? We would want to reach to other groups, including yourselves, with the other three pillars. And one of our key partners as well is the Public Health Agency of Canada. So although I can't reflect on, and I'll turn it over to you, Mary Beth, but I think as we proceed, not only in PEI, but across all provinces and territories, I think there's significant opportunity here for our two organizations to really partner and try to develop something that supports individual schools in addressing multiple areas, like physical health and education, like various other topics. And yeah, just wanted to say, I think there's an opportunity there for us to work together. And then Pat Martz is on the call as well. She's the co-chair. I don't know if Pat, if you wanted to add anything.
Thanks, Sterling. Excellent. Thank you all. This is a great opportunity. Sometimes I just wanted to address the policy piece. Sometimes we look at policy as the big P policy and we forget about that small p policy. And when we're looking at schools and school authorities, that small p policy can be as much as the vision, mission, and values of the school authority, school jurisdiction. Those can be the kind of policies that you're aligning, or small p policies that you're aligning your work to. So that when you're using that comprehensive school health framework and we're looking at something, you know, the big talk is how do we keep the kids physically active to support their mental well-being? What is in that physical and social environment to support that physical activity? What is in the school's small p policies to support that physical activity? What is in the teachings and learnings, the curriculum to support that physical activity? And who are the partners and supports to support that physical activity? That's how we in the Joint Consortium and elsewhere use that comprehensive school health framework to take an initiative like getting kids physically active throughout the day using all those 4 components and it helps us identify the gaps and the assets that we have. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and hearing what everyone has to contribute today. So thank you.
Thanks, Pat. So Mary Beth, I didn't want to forget about you. We'll circle back to to Anthony's question about PEI. I kind of took us on a little rabbit hole there in my opportunity. You go ahead, Mary Beth.
I'm usually pretty brief. I guess I can speak to the curriculum piece and on PEI. We're very much still work in progress. I think like most jurisdictions, we're looking at going back in September a few different approaches, one being a blended learning model and revising the curriculum around the number of hours where we would have face-to-face opportunities with our learners. And so I guess we're really trying to get that right and promote those, you know, social emotional learning competencies, maybe in a way face-to-face, but also through an online community with our students as well. So I'll stop there. And if you have any questions, Anthony, I can go from there.
Okay, thanks so much. Folks, just to remind you, please use the raise the hand feature on this. We'd love to get some questions in and remind you that we have our clinical school psychologists here as well to answer some questions. So please be thinking about that. I'd like to switch gears to Quebec and hear some of the Quebec story. If there's someone on the line from Quebec that would kindly do that. Okay.
I'm not sure if that means it's going really well or it's not.
Obviously. So we have a hand up from Bev. Bev, would you like to take the microphone?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having these meetings. They're wonderful, the Cross-Canada Check-ins. Just wanted to speak about comprehensive school health. I know our school division is in Winnipeg and River East Transcona. We have one of our school division priorities is safe schools. And I feel like as a teacher, I'm actually a consultant, but it's overwhelming to think about how do we as teachers take on this task of comprehensive school health. But for our school division, we actually got a group of administrators and consultants together, and we came up with a really robust plan about comprehensive school health in our division, everything from our divisional policies, our safety policies at the divisional level. We looked at all the different supports our school division offers around bullying, mental health. We gathered a lot of information there. And then we made recommendations also around comprehensive school health planning in schools and how schools can actually take their school plan and have a big part of their school plan all around safe schools. So having administrators, principals, consultants kind of come together and put their heads together to come up with a large divisional plan, I think was very helpful. And it makes me feel like it's not just us as ed teachers that have to really push it. It's a school division priority. And now it's going to be in our school plan. So it's a very positive step that we're looking to implement next year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm waiting for other hands to come up here. While we'll do that, I'll just respond to something that Sterling was talking about the comprehensive school health model itself, perhaps, and the role of the Joint Consortium for School Health in defining it. And really, maybe this is an opportunity to redefine it. I've always argued that it is a Eurocentric model that perhaps needs some modification. Pillars are as Eurocentric as you can get, quite frankly, and it needs a different way of thinking about it. But in this situation, these circumstances, is it the model that really applies? Remembering there are many different variations. It is called Health Promoting Schools internationally rather than Comprehensive School Health, and there are lots of different versions of it. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is we tend to put policy, practice, and research together. And that's been the most powerful projects that have happened in the country, where we've had researchers working with people, practitioners working with people from governments to try and affect policy and change in a very systematic way. And there have been some great examples of that. The large school health research projects that exist right now are frankly under threat. And they know, I think they think they've got about a 10% chance of being able to carry on. So this work is needed. It's never been so needed, but it's equally becoming harder in the current context. So it's just one of the challenges we have to deal with. Okay, let's look and see who has a question or a comment for us. Okay, maybe we could switch to province. How about someone from Manitoba then? Jessica, would you like to go ahead? Jessica Woolen. Okay, Jessica.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, great.
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. My name's Jessie. I'm from BC. I'm actually a sexual health educator and work at lots of different schools. Hi, Lisa. I was lucky enough to do a presentation at the last, at the conference at Douglas College last year, or kind of last year. And I built a program called the Sex Ed Circuit for PE teachers. So I'm a PE teacher, I'm also a social studies teacher, and I know that so many people have a hard time teaching sexual health education and that mental health piece. Mostly because it's a big load to add on to the list of the curriculum that we already have to teach. So anyway, I'm just letting you all know because I feel like I've got this great thing that I wanted to share that's working, which is engaging students in small groups where the teachers themselves don't have to do a lot of the, here's a condom demo, here's about mental health, but instead getting kids into small groups and really focusing on specific topics. And a big part of that is the social emotional. For example, having a station on consent or having a station on mental wellness. How are you taking care of yourself during this pandemic? So the reason it's relevant is that I wonder if there's a way for forward when it comes to this new year. How do we blend? I think there's still going to be social distancing happening and the online, especially if we have a second wave. It feels like the next step forward is we're going to be doing some in person and some at home. So how do we make sure that there's still connection between the kids that are at school in some kind of like pods, that they have their same small group of pods that they're either working with at school, or those same small pods that are working and connecting in small groups to accomplish for accountability, that idea that, you know, when you work out with a friend, you're more likely to do it than if the friend doesn't exist. You're like, I'm not going to bother. So anyway, I wanted to let you know, I'll share a link of the Sex Ed Circuit. It's not online yet. I actually created it because I wanted teenagers to really talk to each other. The irony of then the pandemic, because I always worry about kids being on phones all the time and being socially distanced. But then here we have a pandemic. So I have to put it online, which is a big project, but we'll see how that works. But anyway, I'll share it. I'll share what it is and you can take a look. And yeah, the other last thing I was going to say is, funnily enough, my neighbor owns a bunch of gyms and kind of like supports gyms as an engineer. And for some of the gyms, they're seeing better turnout for physical education they've ever seen before. And I think perhaps that's the extra time people have to put themselves first and get the physical education done, or the physical activity done in the morning. So I just thought that was an interesting side note that I think for some people, I know for myself, I'm doing more physical activity than I've ever done, also with my family. So I wonder what that piece is how do we keep moving forward with that and then welcome the other kids that are having a hard time being physical. So anyway, that's from BC.
Thank you. Would someone like to respond to that?
And dead silence.
That's okay. One thing you did talk about, there were resources. And in previous conversations, I've heard teen mental health at org as one resource. Perhaps I can just ask someone from the PHE Canada office to come in and talk about some of the resources that have been developed or are in development.
Can I say one more thing, Anthony?
Sure.
Lisa from BC again. One of the things that I think some of the high school teachers are finding is that some of the outlying students who don't actually participate very much are actually participating more and are more successful with the online or the distance, looking at more individualized activities and being able to make choices. And once the competition is taken away, a lot of these kids seem to be thriving. So that's one of the positives of looking at phys ed in our new situation.
Super.
And I think too, one of the things that we need to think about when coming back into whatever continued learning program or environment that we're going to have coming forward is looking at not just the movement piece within physical education, like many of us kind of get focused on that activity piece, that movement piece. I think we are seeing more people active for a variety of reasons. But we also have a large body of students that will be coming back to school that have not had that level of activity, again, for a variety of different reasons: home life, safety, parental support, physical environment. And so thinking about how do we support not only the physical aspect of the child's learning, but also that emotional, that mental, that creating that sense of safety, that sense of belonging, that sense of trust, after being out of our system for what could, for some of us, be 6+ months. And so thinking about that, and I think that's why it's such a great opportunity for us to have Dr. McGonnell and Dr. King here with us today to kind of help us wade through some of that, and how do we actually help support our students so we can get them back to a level of readiness where learning can take place. That's beyond just the physical. So we've had a lot of conversation so far around the physical, but is there an opportunity for us to kind of expand that into that cognitive, behavioral, social, emotional space?
I can jump in there, Lori. Thank you for that, and I'll just leapfrog from what you're saying back to Anthony's question about the supports at PHE Canada. So I'm Melanie Davis. I'm the executive director with PHE Canada. Thanks to everybody who has come online. I too, like somebody said, have really valued these cross-country check-ins. It's just been an incredible opportunity amidst a pandemic. So thank you for staying with us and contributing to the really dynamic conversations that we've had. from the perspective of PHE Canada, it's been a journey. You know, when we started this, you know, 8-9 weeks ago, we sorry about the noise behind me. The dog just opened the door. So we started with what do teachers need right now? And so you're right, Lori, it started with movement. It started with ensuring that young people could maintain their learning during this time. And so we have the Home Learning Center, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And so every week we've been adding new resources to that. And the idea behind those is that that's for the remote online learning. And as we move through this scenario, we're just in the process now. And Sterling and Pat, I loved your suggestion of collaborating. So we're in the process of creating guidelines for how PHE can be implemented safely and effectively across the country. Those are those, I wouldn't even say they're the small piece, it's guidelines. And the call to act will be to take those guidelines and to turn them into those small P's and big P's in your jurisdictions. So, so that's kind of what's coming next. And then after that, as we learn more about what school will look like across the country over the course of the summer, we'll start to build the adapted resources that folks are going to need to be able to do exactly what Lori said, support all the domains of physical and health education, the affective, the social, the cognitive, and the physical. So our team's been super busy, but I know that each one of you is super busy as well. So collectively, I think we are responding to an unprecedented situation and turning this into an opportunity for some really important work that can be done under the umbrella of PHE in September. So I'll pass it back to you, Anthony.
Thanks, Melanie. That's really appreciated. I see also from PHE Canada, Ryan is busy typing some links and things in there for everyone to take. And I wonder, Tricia, perhaps if you wanted to highlight some specific go-to places on the PHE Canada website or highlight specific resources.
Sure. Sorry, Anthony, I actually stepped away when you first said my daughter was crying. That is what I say every day whenever I'm on a call. So she was in fact crying, so I missed it. But to talk to it a little bit. So I work with PHE Canada and I've been a part of the team that's been putting together the resources. So were you looking specifically for the the emotional well-being or any of them?
Yes, I think that would be a priority, but any of them for sure.
Okay, so I can talk the emotional well-being. We have modeled after social emotional learning. So you'll see that there's some that are geared towards self-awareness, responsible decision-making, social awareness, and then and kind of we're working on those skills. And so each of them, I believe there's 45 total now, broken up into kindergarten, grade 3, grades 4 to 6, and grades 7 to 12, 15 per grade level. And then we have the healthy eating strand as well as the physical education, which each have 45 activities. And then we just launched yesterday some healthy bodies activities around sex education, growth and development, to parallel with Renee Gregerson, if anyone had a chance to be on her sex education webinar yesterday. And so to help with some of those topics that can be probably particularly difficult to provide learning opportunities in an at-home environment. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's that's what they are. And I think Ryan put up the links there. So if anyone hasn't seen them yet, you can check them out there. So.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tricia. I'm going to move to talk about partnerships and ask people that are involved in providing services to schools to talk in a minute. So just be thinking around that. But before we do that, I'd like to go back to my colleagues, Dr. McGonnell and Dr. King, and ask them about what makes a good resource in terms of social and emotional development. Like what should teachers look for in a quality resource and in choosing what to use with young people?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I think I think really the first thing would be the source. Like that would be my number one recommendation, is look to the source, and if the source is reliable, then hopefully the information is reliable. So that I think I put in the chat, Anxiety Canada is a really good resource, and so that's a resource I recommend to all the parents and teachers and kids that I work with, because I know that the information is evidence-based, and it's just really well organized, and it's printable, there's PDFs, it's just really user-friendly. So using sites like that, I think someone else mentioned the WE site as well. So if the source is reputable, that would be my number one recommendation. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to add to that.
No, I think looking at the source is probably the number one thing to do. And I think also we have to rely on our common sense a little bit as well. I mean, so Anthony, Krista teaches a course about social emotional learning, and so like if people are interested, we could probably fairly easily get together kind of a list of some materials that would be good and give them to you, and you can share them.
Absolutely.
But Sarah, I'm trying to think about the booklets that we bought a few years ago that I can't think of the name of, that we get the students to look at. Never mind, it's not going to come to me. Yeah, sorry. No memory for any kind of name at all. Yeah, and I think too that when you're talking about social emotional learning, like any kind of learning, we have to think about the age of the child, so that not all materials are good for all children. And so if you could find something that has that doesn't claim to be one size fits all, it's more likely to be better developed than something that just sort of talks in broad terms. Because what social emotional learning, like what you want to try and help develop, there's very definitely a developmental progress with this, as there is with everything else. And what you want to try and help children who are in, kindergarten develop is very different from where you are at the end of, middle school, for example.
Yeah, Melissa, the booklets you were talking about is the Mind Up curriculum.
Yes, it is.
So some of you are probably really familiar with this, but the thing about that curriculum is that it's divided really nicely into developmental groups. So there's a group for kindergarten to grade 2, grade 3 to 5, grade 6 to 8. So if you're looking at resources, when you find a resource that acknowledges that kids, at different developmental stages need different information or need information presented differently, that's probably, as Melissa said, it's probably a better developed program where someone's actually really thought about what kids at different ages need. So like the Mind Up curriculum is one example of that, but there are other curricula
Yes.
that are divided up, into different age groups in a similar way.
And I think what it does very nicely is introduces kids to the idea that your brain is a part of your body that's important, the way your heart is important and your digestive system is important, and it helps them learn something about it so that they don't just feel like when they're having feelings or reactions to things that it's coming out of nowhere, there's a reason for it. And so and knowing about something and knowing that you can have some control over things gives you power. And when you feel powerless, it's always better to feel like you can do something about something than to just feel like it has control over you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you very much. Okay, let's move to talk about partnerships and services. I'm particularly interested here to hear from individuals or organizations that support schools and how you're having to change or modify your approach. So to put people on the spot, enjoy doing this, where I could ask Karen and Alex, perhaps from Sport for Life in BC, or if there's someone from the Pacific Institute for Sport Excellence, or from Box Kids, or from Ophia, or Everactive. There's quite a list. Hopefully someone can chime in and tell us how you're all changing your approach.
Hi, Anthony. This is Lynn from Box.
Thanks, Lynn.
So we've been able to service a lot of schools all across the country. with completely free resources. And what we've managed to do is put absolutely all these resources online. So we've been able to pivot from in-school and in-class resources to make them available to parents at home that wanted to use them, along with any teachers from any schools. We've also added in, we have a YouTube channel where we link our activities. We try and have very short videos to accompany them, because we realize that not everybody using our resources are very familiar with movements or don't have the time to look at everything. We have a calendar each month with links and with box bursts, which are 1 to 10 minute activities. In addition, we have daily, during the week, live workouts of 20 to 25 minutes happening on Facebook on our Box Canada page. We've also invited some Olympians to lead some of these courses. So it's been going really, really well. A lot of engagement, and a lot of people that were not necessarily aware of the free resources in the past are able to engage. So we are listed on the PHE Canada page in the staff picks. There's a link. Everything is available to each one of you just with an email address. That's how you log in with your email address. And every month we're adding to the resource list. Everything is completely downloadable as well. So downloadable for those that are back in school if they are not in a classroom but want to use them outside. And we also have weekly emails that you could sign up for, where you get 5 activities emailed to you right to your inbox with a video link. So if you want shorter emails, 1 per week, we get that, or you could have everything in a calendar or on the website or YouTube channel as well.
That's great. And when you're tired of that, you can read Spark by John Ratey, correct?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what all the programs are based on.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's put Chris Ben-Mac on the spot. Chris, would you mind talking about Everactive? I realize you've been having regular conversations with your community, these kind of conversations. Perhaps there's other things you might want to highlight.
Yeah, I'll do my best, I suppose. Working closely with our provincial partners, Alberta Health Services, the Be Fit for Life network, to support school communities and trying to figure out where they are. It's a very contextual conversation, I think, given provincial guidelines and strategies that are in place. So we're doing our best to look for the fall. We know there's some initiatives nationally by Melanie and her team to look at what the school system is going to look like come the fall and how we can best support that. We're doing our best to resource and provide resources for physical activity, positive mental well-being, and just supporting communities very broadly, and doing our best to include our partners in a lot of that work as well. So happy to answer questions if there's folks from Alberta on the call, if there's ways that we can support. I'm certainly happy to do that and have a conversation.
Thanks, Chris. Did we have Alex or Karen from Sport for Life?
Yeah, this is Alex here.
Thanks, Alex.
Hello. I'm Alex from Sport for Life. I'm the Senior Manager of Education and Evaluation at Sport for Life. And it's interesting, and we're partnering with PHE Canada, Childhood Obesity Foundation, and Indigenous Sport and Physical Activity Recreation Council right now in BC on a new project that was supposed to be starting this spring for supporting elementary school teachers with physical and health education curriculum rollout and developing physical activity and physical literacy. And we've had to put a delay on that because it didn't make sense with the current context, and we can't deliver what we were looking at delivering right now. And so all of our planning has gone to shifting to starting in the fall. And even with that, looking at what are the activities, what are the programs that we were looking at providing, which some of the key components were around teacher mentorship, and looking at what could this look like if there are limited opportunities for an outside person to come into a school and provide support within the school environment, and how do you do these things and activities while keeping kids physically distant to adhere to the different guidelines. So right now we're going through the process of not only developing the resources, which range from hard copy resources to workshops and these mentorship sessions, to how can we make sure that these resources as they come out are going to not be for what was our world in January, and that they're going to be able to be supportive for elementary school teachers in BC with what the reality is going to be in September. Right now, we're in BC, June 1st, there are options for people to return to school, parents to send their kids back. And we're hoping to use this time to see what things may look like come September and be able to think about what could that look like for developing physical activity and physical literacy in a classroom or in an outside space, because we're hearing that some gyms are going to be used as learning pods, and there's other considerations, like when winter comes, sometimes you aren't able to go outside. So where are other spaces that can be used and still have suitable distance for students to participate and be active, but also acknowledging there's so many other pressures too. So it's a interesting time for us trying to start some new work around school physical activity and physical literacy in BC. But we're really trying to listen to what people are telling us and think about things within the context of the public health guidelines that we have to follow right now.
Thank you. Reminder, folks, to put up your hand, please, for your questions or your comments, and we'll get to you. We'd love to see that. Perhaps we could go to Ontario. It's someone from OFIA on the call. I'd love to hear how the things that you're doing.
Anthony, it's Laura. I'm with OASFI, but also work in combination with OFIA in Ontario. And we're working together to advocate to the ministry around return to school in September, and trying to ensure, for all the reasons that have been mentioned today, that physical and health education is a priority going back. We have similarly been doing some cross-Ontario check-ins. We had one yesterday with system leads, and we have two next week, one with elementary and one with secondary. OFIA has created, they're doing online classes once a week that are focusing on fundamental movement skills. And after the lesson on Monday, they're then doing a Twitter chat on a Friday to answer teachers' questions around the lesson that was held. And we've been providing resources to all our educators through OFIA and OASFI.
Thank you very much. That's appreciated. And just a note in the chat here, lots of people are posting links. Thank you to Ryan. PHE Canada is posting some links there. Sarah and Melissa, from the psychology point of view, have highlighted some resources. Box have put theirs up. So just a quick question to the PHE Canada folks. Is this recorded so that folks can access those later on?
It is recorded, Anthony, and we will compile all the conversation and make that available on our website as well.
Great, thanks very much. So we're just over an hour into the conversation. We have about another 20 minutes left. So this is a chance for you to open up with the burning thing that you wanted to ask, or the burning point that you wanted to make. So I'm just going to be quiet for a minute and let people come forward with what they wanted to say.
So there was a question in the chat box, just about, how about intramurals K to 12? What could that possibly look like next year? And maybe we can just kind of throw that out to the group. does anyone have any ideas of how that structure can still be maintained, but maybe in a modified way?
Someone like to respond to that? If not, Vicky, I think you had a question or comment for us.
Yeah, just mine is more on the health side of things. I know that, like we've been saying all along, I know we worry a lot about the physical movement and the movement aspect of physical and health ed. But my big concern right now is I know that health ed needs to kind of take a priority when we start to get back into things, and that anxiety level of some of the students that we're going to have. And I know that Nova Scotia, for example, is on the other end of this because our physical and health ed courses are not put together. So they're taught separately. Phys ed is to be taught by a physical education specialist. Health ed, however, doesn't have to be. So I know in a lot of cases, like in my building, we have a lot of teachers teaching health ed and healthy living who have no background in it. And I'm just wondering how other people are planning on trying to support those teachers who maybe are not comfortable with the curriculum and the health ed side of things, and students kind of coming back. So I'm just kind of maybe looking for resources or ways that people are planning on kind of helping to support the other people in their building.
Someone like to respond to Vicky? If not, Charmaine, you had a question.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm phoning from Kelowna, BC, and I do have a burning question. As Lisa mentioned earlier, as of June 1st, we are expected to be opening up the schools to students part-time. I'm in an elementary school, and I want to know just how much equipment are students using in other provinces? For example, are you assigning them each equipment and they keep it the whole time? I mean, I don't have enough for 200 students. Or are you sanitizing in between? Or are you just teaching games without equipment? Are you expecting your custodians to clean every night? How are you handling the equipment use?
And so I just see in the chat, Charmaine, some are saying that it's varied from teacher to teacher. There has been conversation, I know, here in Nova Scotia at the provincial level around how we're possibly going to manage that. I think possibly for the remainder of your school year, to be able to provide some curricular activities and lessons that require low equipment or no equipment, because right now the conversation is that if equipment is used, it does have to get sanitized between each use. And so right now we are quite fortunate, if we can say that we are coming into a time of year where the weather is better. We can get out of doors and do some individual skill building without the use of equipment or implements. So I think that's probably where things need to start right now. And what happens in September is anyone's guess at this point. There has been conversation though about adding to student supply lists some individual pieces of equipment, low cost equipment, playground ball, jump rope, those pieces, tennis ball, those types of things that would be in a student's own kit And that's what we would start using for the initial phase of reintroducing PE using equipment, where every student would have their own.
Oh, interesting. Great. Thanks.
Are other jurisdictions thinking about using those kits? Okay, not hearing any. Let's leave it open for people to put up their hands.
So Anthony, there was just a question in the chat. Is the ministry providing money for these kits? So at this point in time, it's just a conversation that we've been having amongst our provincial wellness group. We haven't approached our regions or our ministry as of yet around that. We're trying to come up with a variety of different scenarios that we think could be initiated so that PE and health ed do not get suspended come September. And so that's why we were looking at having it a combination of having the ministry support some things, and then but having the students purchase, like I said, low cost, like dollar store type items that could be put into a PE kit, their own personal PE kit. And so, and those items would be added to their school supplies list. So I have a question, if nobody's going to jump in right now. I'm wondering about how you as individuals or your family members, how are you feeling about the possibility of returning to school? And, you know, what do you think some of the supports you're going to need so that you feel safe returning? Or and not only just safe physically, but emotionally and mentally as well, so that your needs are being met so you can meet the needs of your students. So have you been giving any thought to how you're going to maintain your own health and well-being, or what you need to do to be able to return to work in the normal, if there is such a thing as normal fashion?
Hi, Lisa here. Do you hear me? Okay. One of the things that I've been thinking about is having administrative support, because if a child does come to school that is exhibiting any symptoms like a cough, runny nose, not feeling well, we need the admin support so that child will be removed or not allowed in the school directly, right? Like, I know we're all supposed to do self-check-ins, but how many times do we have kids drag their little bodies into school because they're sick and the parents have no place for them to go? So I really feel, for me, I need administrative support so that if a child does come with symptoms, that they'll be removed and that we're not all put at risk. That's what I need. And I mean, I'm going back next week. And I've been with a couple sparkly people for the last 2 weeks, working with them with very little physical distance. And we've been playing basketball, one of the children and I. And as soon as I see like a hand go towards the face or the mouth, I'm like, wash the hands, have soap, you know, and we go over all the protocol again. That's what's making me feel safe, is just knowing that, you know, that we have to have administrative support to ensure that we're healthy.
Just before we came on this call, Laurie and I were talking about teacher wellness, and there was some interest in developing surveys to capture some of that and what the needs of teachers are. And I wanted to put my colleagues on the spot, perhaps for the last time today, and ask Melissa or Sarah around what should teachers do if they have anxieties about going back to school? What some strategies they could perhaps use?
Well, I'll begin the anxiety discussion by saying I always try and remind people to remember that there's a difference between worry and anxiety. So anxiety is a clinical disorder, and it's impairing, and worry is what most of us experience on a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying that people might not have clinical levels of anxiety as a result of this, but I think it's important just to kind of categorize like what's just kind of normal everyday worry, which is fine. Like I think normalizing it is and not being so hard on yourself for feeling worried about it is really important, because everybody gets worried. It's normal. It's necessary. So I think don't be so hard on yourself and cut yourself a little bit of slack for feeling worried, because it's unknown and it's uncomfortable, and those things make us worried most of the time. So cut yourself some slack, take care of yourself, try and do little things for yourself to take care of your wellness. And that might even just be 5 or 10 minutes in a day where you can have some time to yourself to do something pleasurable. But self-care is really important to all of us at a time like this, whether we're back in the school building or still working from home. I think too, like minimizing the constant discussion about it. It's natural that we want to talk about it. It's natural that we want to have the news on to get some information, but I think we've probably all felt over the last few months, there comes a point where there's a saturation and we have to kind of change the topic and talk about something else. So I think avoiding that constant water cooler chit chat about it, and even actively changing the subject if you feel it's just gone on too long. And so kind of avoiding the oversaturation of news and social media about it, and thinking about something different for a change would be a few strategies that I would suggest. I don't know, Melissa, what do you think?
I think those are excellent ideas, as always. So I would agree with you. I think, what you said at the beginning about trying to distinguish between what's the fact that what I'm feeling is normal, and also trying to think about if I'm thinking about, just because you're thinking about something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're worrying about it. Thinking about something and making a plan doesn't mean that you're worried. That's a really good thing to do, and it's necessary to think about things and make plans about them. And I think most people, even though we're in unusual times and people are experiencing new things, and everybody's plate or pot or whatever analogy you want to use is pretty full, for the most part, when people are generally well, they can cope with things. And if you feel like you're not coping in the moment, that's also pretty normal, in these kinds of unusual times. But that if you do have start to feel like you're really not coping, it's that there are places you can go to do something about that, and don't hesitate. The same way that we, I think that, so I want to be clear that physical education is not my area of expertise in any way, shape, or form. But if somebody was struggling to learn a physical activity or had an injury of some kind, you would suggest they go see a professional about it. It's also important to think about your emotional and mental health that way too. So if it's at the point where, and there's no magic point, right? There's nothing wrong with doing preventative mental health work either to stop yourself from getting, more worried about something. All schools, as far as I know, in Canada have some kind of access to school psychology services, and so use school psychologists. They're often kind of underutilized, and so they might not be able to help you with your mental health, but they know people. Like, they would be a good resource for you to access other information from. So take advantage of them in a good way.
Well, thank you for that. Folks, we're into the final wrap up here, so I'm just going to provide an opportunity here for folks to ask or answer any questions that you want to. Yes. Brenda, I think. Brenda, you're on mute. You mute though.
All right. Can you hear me? Hi. I've struggled up and down with this, and this has not been an easy experience for any of us. And what I've found that really worked for me was finding silver linings in everything. The very fact that, I'm stuck at home, but I actually get to see how much my child can progress in one area, or like doing active pathways, and I actually would film it, and then my child the other day goes, "Mommy, this is how you do an active pathway." And I was like, boom, I've just impacted my own child. There goes my husband as he walks by. But I found it's a struggle. And for me going back to work, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm completely scared of contracting anything else, but it's the people around me and my own family that are there to support me that have made a big difference, and keeping that anxiety down and sort of taking that breath and going, okay, well, what's good? What's positive right now? And I think doing this right now with all of you guys is a huge positive, something that we don't do enough of and have never done enough of. And finally, we're getting the chance to do it and connect in a huge way.
That is such a great and powerful message. Thank you. Thank you. Jez Walsh, the comment you'd like to make. Jez? Oh, sorry, Jen. Sorry, we had a typo there. Jen.
Well, my concern about, like, I heard somebody else talking about how are we going to send kids home if they're going to be sick? If they come to school sick, like, I'm talking from very rural. We only have 36 students, kindergarten to grade 12. How are we going to determine when we go back to school? Because in Newfoundland, like, we've already announced that, or the board announced that kids will not be re-entering the buildings until September at the earliest. That's at the very earliest. So if they come into the school in September, I know myself, in October, I'm probably going to come into contact with strep throat or any tonsillitis or anything, because that's just my annual thing. I come into contact with that. So how are we going to look at a child who might have allergies and they might be sniffing, sneezing, coughing, and tell them that they have to go home if they're not actually sick with COVID-19? It's not, or if it's not something that's contagious. I mean, I know, for example, like, my principal has extremely bad allergies to even scent, and that comes off as the sniffing, sneezing, coughing, because it'll choke him up. So is he going to have to leave the building because he has allergies? Like, how are we going to distinguish what is a threat to us and what is not a threat to us? Because that's my major concern. I don't have any anxiety about heading back to work. Not big anxieties anyway that would make me not want to go. But the only thing is my concern is for the children and other staff members. Because when it comes that something is contagious, then how do we control it? We don't know if something is contagious until it's spread right through the school. So I think that would be the only concern of mine about heading back to work, is if we're looking at sending kids home, where do we send them? Because, like I said, I'm in a rural community. Everybody here either works for the community or works outside of the community, which outside of the community is an hour and a half away to the closest, like, center. So if they're an hour and a half away, well, trying to get them back off of work and get them, whether it's a substitute or somebody to fill in for them at work, it's almost like it's nearly impossible. We have children with disabilities as well, and we don't have ABA at-home therapists that can actually step in and be or act as a babysitter for these children with disabilities, and that could be pervasive needs or that could be small needs. And I guess furthermore, another concern is, like, our internet connection. If we could promote things like Google Classroom and online learning and Zoom Meets, or Google Meets is what we use, how do we encourage the students to continue their learning at home while they are sent home because they are sick when there's no internet service? Like, there's a whole bundle of issues in my area that's concerning for the actual education of these children. So, like, if they can't come to phys ed class and and play. Like, that's one thing, but even as much as academics go, like as far as academics go, how are we going to incorporate an educational program that's going to like get them where they need to be by the end of the year? There's kids in the school and out of the school that are sick all the time. I mean, they could come in September, but by October they probably have a flu, and they might not get rid of it because their immune system may be low. They might not get rid of it for 6 to 8 weeks. So you're taking them away from the whole educational aspect of learning at that point.
So thanks, Jen. I mean, I think we all share your concern. It is, you know, a deep held concern. My only hope in this is that all power to PSAC and NLTA, and hopefully you can rally together and move the Newfoundland government, and hopefully similar things can happen in other jurisdictions. Folks, we're up to time. I see people are busy signing off, so I want to close. I'll give the final word to Laurie, but I just want to convey my thanks to you. Great discussion, lots of passion. Thank you for everything that you do for the health of young people. Stay strong and stay well yourself. A special thank you to my colleagues, Dr. Melissa McGonnell and Dr. Sarah King, for your support and your questions. That's very much appreciated. And to the staff at PHE Canada for organising this event today, and for all your contributions. Thank you. Laurie.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. And yes, I want to just build on what Anthony said about, you know, having people in a community come together to share concerns, to share ideas, and to collaborate. And that is really kind of the spirit behind comprehensive school health, or health promoting schools. And so we were really, really fortunate today to have partners like Dr. McGonnell, Dr. King, JCSH, Box, Sport for Life to join us in this call, because it does take a community for this to happen. We are all pulling in the same direction, so it just makes sense that we come together and connect and try to figure these things out. There are so many unknowns right now, and it's not that people are not trying to come up with the best solutions possible for everyone, but I just think it takes time, because it's an unknown. You don't know if the step that you take is the right step or not. And so we are here. We're going to continue to be here. We have more check-ins coming up. Our next check-in is going to specifically speak to how, as physical educators, how are we going to be able to provide our curriculum, deliver our programs, given that it could be a very, very different environment come September. And so that conversation is going to take place next Friday. So please consider joining us. It'll be more targeted to some of the questions that you had today. And be thinking about that over the next week, and maybe come to the conversation with some new and innovative ideas that we can ensure that our programs do take place and do not get suspended. One of the things that we want to be prepared for is that if we do have ministries or regions that come to us and say, you know, we just don't feel that it's safe for you to be able to provide your program, we can go back to them and say, yes, it is, and here is how. We've thought about this, we've put together a plan, and you know, that's some of the guideline conversation that we're going to have next week. So thank you, Anthony. It's always great to be with you and to work together and collaborate. Thank you to the PHE Canada staff. They have worked so hard, everyone. Like what they have put together over the last 8.5, 9 weeks to support the healthy growth and development of all students across Canada has been amazing. And to our partners and to you that make it happen. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Take care, be well, get outside.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.